So some of you may or may not have seen an email that I sent out last night, which also includes a schedule for this week. And that's different classes that are coming up. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the email on your screen now? Perfect. So there are 4 classes that we're holding this week. 2 of them are usual ones. 2 of them are unusual ones. One of them is the one you guys are currently at. That's to be a Mensch. We hope to keep that going every week at 11 a.m. A little bit of a time change just to keep things interesting, but also to make it more available for everybody. And that's Pirkei Avot. Today we're learning the last Mishnah of chapter 1. We'll get to that in just a moment. This Monday night, so it means tomorrow night at 7 p.m., I will be giving a class titled Faith and Trust. How can belief in God help me lead a more relaxed lifestyle? This is a class based on, for those of you that are familiar with Chobas HaLevavos, or duties of the heart. It will be based on that, but with a stress on the fact that belief in God is not just something that helps us from a theological or theoretical or philosophical point of view, but it should actually be something we feel in our hearts, and it actually helps us get through on a day-to-day basis. Whether that's something you're struggling with now, or whether that's something that you struggle with on a day-to-day basis like I do, either way, I highly recommend that class. Wednesday, we'll do the Wine and Wisdom, which again, will not have so much to do with our current situation. It'll be more on the Parsha. For those of you that have never been, I encourage you to join and to bring a glass of wine with you. That was so far our most successful Zoom class. We had 20-something people between couples on the screen, etc. Last Wednesday. It was a very new and exciting thing for me. So bring a glass of wine with you. We're going to discuss the Parsha, not on a simplistic level. Most people know the Parsha on a simplistic level. This will be a little bit more in depth, so please join us for that. On Thursday night, Rabbi Hanoka will be giving a class titled Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People? I know it's not directly associated with the current climate, but it's definitely connected, and that will be Thursday night at 7 p.m. Okay, without further ado, let's get right into today's lesson. So back to...
Rabbi, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you just say that we're learning today in memory of...
Yeah, I'm getting there. 1 second.
Oh, sorry.
So I just wanted to bring up the... hold on. Hold on. Okay, does everybody see the textbook? Is that what we have up in front of us? Thumbs up? Yeah, perfect. Okay, great. So before we get started today, this morning's lesson is sponsored by Mrs. Leah Weintraub. If you'd like to sponsor any of the further classes, they're $54 a piece to help us keep things up and running. The class is sponsored by Mrs. Leah Weintraub in honor of her uncle, who I had it was in an email, not in a text message. Leah, why don't you share with us? Today's your uncle's yard site, correct?
Today's my uncle's yard site, Benjamin Ben Yaakov.
And his name is Benjamin Ben Yaakov. We'd like to wish you that his neshama should have an aliyah. Oh, here we go. Here's the information. Benjamin Ben Yaakov, his yard site is today, and we'd like to wish you that his neshama should have an aliyah, should have an ascent. We always wish each other that it should have ascent after ascent until it finally has a descent, right? Because we know that when Mashiach comes, all of the neshamas will come back into bodies and will be reunited with us. So may that be speedily in our days. Amen. L'chaim.
Amen. And I'd just like to say that it was from my uncle that I learned anything that I did learn growing up. It was from my uncle. He was the president of our shul and greatly missed.
This is back in London?
Mm-hmm. Long time ago, yeah.
Sorry,
Birmingham.
Okay, without further ado, let's get right into it. So we've been studying Pirkei Avot. For those of you that have been here every Sunday, this is our 18th class, and I know this because we're holding Mishnah 18. In other words, Mishnah Yudchet, the 18th Mishnah of chapter 1 of Pirkei Avot, which is otherwise known as Ethics of Our Fathers, or as we like to call it, to be a Mensch. And I should mention that this is the book we're using, by the way. For those of you that have never seen it, I highly recommend it. That's the textbook you have in front of you on the screen. For those of you that have never studied Pirkei Avot before or are unfamiliar with what it is, let me give you a quick background. So Pirkei Avot is otherwise known as Mila de Chasidusa, and what it does is it's the part of the Mishnah or the Talmud that transmits to us the everything but the law. In other words, everything beyond the law, let's call it. So the Talmud is full of commentary discussing if someone finds a lost object, how do they return it to the proper owner? And if you want to build a sukkah, how tall should it be? And if there's a squatter, do they have rights to the property or not? And all sorts of laws and laws and laws and laws. Laws about mitzvot between man and man, such as Avot Yisrael and loving a fellow, getting along with each other, etc. Mitzvot between man and God, such as the holidays, such as putting on tefillin, such as prayer, such as blessings, all sorts of mitzvot that apply to women, all the different mitzvot. Pirkei Avot is essentially all of those same rabbis, all of those same scholars, obviously throughout their lives, shared lots of wisdom with their communities, with the Jewish people as a whole, or with even just one-on-one, that were not law specific. In other words, they were more general guidance, general information that will help you be a mensch. That's why we call this class to be a mensch. Information that will help you. Some of it is basic and understandable, and some of it is like, wow, that's wise, and if I can only do that, I would be an amazing person. And so that's what we've been doing. Now, the way that Pirkei Avot is formed, is set up, is that there are six chapters, and starting from chapter 1, we've been doing now 17 Mishnahs, and this is Mishnah number 18. Starting from chapter 1, Mishnah 1, we've been going through the history of the transmission of the oral Torah. What does that mean? We've been going through generation after generation, who led the Jewish people for that generation, and what did they share with the people of that generation. So they kind of choose, the compilers of the Mishnah, which is Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, chose to put one famous saying or famous quote or something that person lived by. Often it's something that person struggled with, or that was a challenge for that person, that rabbi, that leader of the generation, and he overcame that, and that's where this comes from. Hence the fact, for instance, that recently we looked at Hillel, who teaches us about the virtue of patience. And Hillel was known to be an extremely patient man. So without further ado, why don't we dive right into it? Malka, can you read for us the Mishnah itself? I'll zoom in here so that everybody can see it. 1 second, I'll unmute you. Go ahead. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says.
I don't see it.
Oh, okay, my apologies.
I don't see any book. I just see you. I mean, I see everybody, but I don't see the book.
Right, okay, no worries. Leah, can you see the book? Okay, so go ahead. Why don't you read for us?
Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, the world continues to exist and function civilly because of three things: because of justice, because of truth, and because of peace. As it says in Zechariah, judge with truth and try to negotiate a compromise, which leads to a peaceful judgment within your gates.
Okay, so this Mishnah may be familiar to many of you because of this concept of the world continues to exist because of three things. What does that mean? A little throwback, and I know that you guys don't have the book in front of you, but actually two of you do. Those that do have the book in front of you, if you go back to Mishnah Bet, or the second Mishnah of Pirkei Avot, on page 12, you will see that Shimon HaTzadik had something similar to share with us. I'll read for you guys from the book. He would often say, the world stands on and was created in order to fulfill three things: Torah learning, Avodah, serving Hashem, and doing acts of kindness. These are the three things: Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim. So here we have two Mishnahs, each that teach us that the world stands on three things, but they use one small difference of word, and that's what I want to point out. The original Mishnah tells us the world stands on three things, or otherwise put, the world stands for three things. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in this Mishnah is teaching us the world exists because of three things. In other words, three of them are requirements in order for the world to exist. The following three, the next three are not required in order for the world to exist. Rather, who just joined us?
Stephanie.
Welcome. Thank you, Stephanie, for joining. So this Mishnah that we're learning today is not three things that, I apologize. This Mishnah is teaching us three things that are required in order for the world to exist. The prior Mishnah was teaching us three things the world exists for, right? So let's analyze the difference between those two. You'll notice right away that they are much more basic. This Mishnah teaches us truth, justice, peace. These are not just core Jewish values. These are values that Judaism believes are extremely crucial if the world is going to continue to exist. In other words, the moment, and we're going to see that there were times in history when some of those things were lacking, and there were not just great Jewish calamities, but great calamities as a whole. We'll get to that in just a moment. But the first Mishnah, or the second Mishnah in this chapter, spoke of three things that kind of give the world purpose. These are the reasons the world exists. And those are Torah, prayer, and charity, or every single mitzvah that exists. Okay, let's talk let's focus though on this Mishnah. This Mishnah talks about justice, truth, and peace. So just to give you guys the full picture that I was saying earlier, the reason which is given for why the great flood came to the world in the Bible, in the Torah, in Parshat Noach, we learn about the fact that God wiped out the entire world besides for Noach and his family. The Torah tells us that the people before Noach, in other words, during Noach's time, were wicked. And it says that they actually committed every single grievance and every single transgression that God had given them. In other words, there were 7 laws, or people like to tout them as 7 laws, but it was really 7 general laws. They were it was a basic list of rules of how to live life, and they completely went against those laws. But still, God did not destroy the world. God decided to destroy the world, to wipe out and start over, to hit the reset button when, our sages teach us, when the justice system collapsed. In other words, when it wasn't just rape was rampant, murder was common, stealing was commonplace. It wasn't just those things. It was that on top of all that, there was no justice system. God said, I need there to be justice in this world in order for the world to exist. Hence the fact that Judaism has always placed a tremendous emphasis on judgment. We're analyzing the 3 one at a time. We'll read inside in a moment. But let's just go through a little bit historically. I can read for you some verses which I prepared for the class. Hold on. About justice. Starting, by the way, we could start with Noah, but even beyond Noah, starting from Abraham Avinu, right? Abraham. God, when God speaks about why am I choosing Abraham? Why do I love Abraham so much? Of course, he's the first one to have discovered God, monotheism, etc. But God doesn't mention he does mention the fact that Abraham spread monotheism throughout the world. But one of the things that he mentions to him is, I have the verse here, one second. I have known him, says Hashem, so that he will command his children and his household after him, and they will keep the path of Hashem to perform. The words are tzedakah u'mishpat, charity and justice. God will then bring about for Abraham everything that he promised. This is from Bereshit, chapter 18, verse 19, chapter Yudchet, pasuk Yutet. In other words, when Hashem is choosing Avraham, when he is saying, oh, this is the man who follows my way, of course he says he spread my name throughout the land, but he also calls him the one who seeks justice. Avraham wanted justice. We know this famously with Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham actually steps forward and tries to pursue justice on their behalf. Fast forward, Moses, when Moshe Rabbeinu comes, what does it say? That Moshe Rabbeinu was primarily, we learned this in Parshat Yitro, or Jethro, when Moses' father-in-law tells him, oh, this is becoming too much for you. What is Moses doing that's becoming too much for him? Is he teaching too much Torah? No, that's not what's going on. Even though Moses is famous, by the way, for teaching Torah. And the whole Torah is called on Moses' name. We call it Torah Moshe. It's the Torah that Moshe brought us from God, etc. Right? But that's not what Moshe is so busy doing with the Jewish people. It's specifically justice. He is judging the people. By the way, if we fast forward to the time immediately after Moshe Rabbeinu, so Joshua and Astil and Kenaz and I don't know why all of the judges' names are, but the first book of Tanakh, immediately after the 5 books of Moses is what? Is Yoshua, and then after Yoshua, Shoftim, in which each chapter deals with a different era of the Jewish people where they had a judge that judged them. The leader of the Jewish people was called a judge. Even later on, by the way, when the leader of the Jewish people would be a nasi, would be called a prince, or would be called whatever. Very often, that person was also the Av Bet Din, which meant the leader of the Bet Din, the leader of the house of justice. Justice has always been a tremendously important thing. King David speaks of it in Psalms. King Solomon is always famous for being the wisest of all men, but how do we show his wiseness? Wiseness? That doesn't sound like a word. But how do we show his wisdom? Specifically through justice. In fact, there's another verse in Melachim, which is the book that speaks about King Solomon and the way he did justice with the Jewish people, etc. What does it say? It says that it's a good thing I'm not out and about. I have a cough. I don't know if it's the coronavirus, but hopefully not. When Shlomo HaMelech, when King Solomon, the wisest of all men, is praying to God, what does he say? He says, give your servant a listening heart to judge your nation, to distinguish between good and evil. Solomon knew the language of the animals. Solomon knew the reasoning behind every mitzvah, but that's not what he prayed to God for. He prayed to God, please, God, give me the wisdom to be able to judge people properly. Because justice has always been an extremely important thing for the Jewish people. Okay. Esther Korfeld, can you see the textbook? Okay, so why don't you read for us, Play Nicely, My Children. Go ahead.
Play nicely, my children. Just as parents love nothing more than to see their children getting along and caring for each other, Hashem takes great pleasure when we live in peace with one another. The three virtues mentioned in our Mishnah are the keys to leading a peaceful life. Peace is attained when there is justice, which brings the truth to light. When a Rav or Beis Din resolves an issue correctly in accordance with the Torah, it brings true peace.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So, so these three things are not just important because they are important values. They're important, and in order for society to exist as a whole, because we could say that too, by the way. Every secular society will tell you in America, right now, by the way, one of the most important things that's staying open is the justice system. The police are still functioning. The fire department is still functioning. The justice system, like judges and lawyers, well, lawyers are working from home, but the justice system, and there's actually a little bit of controversy about it, about why. That's right, Esther, thank you. Do you want to share something? 1 second, go ahead.
I just want to say the courts are actually closed, and they issued new orders like every day last week. They're closed with the exception of certain probate matters, and of course anything that has to do with restraining orders or if people are in harm.
Right.
But
I will mention, by the way,
hearings.
I will mention, and one of the reasons is because they're obviously trying to promote social distancing as much as possible. And I did see that somebody was saying that public defenders feel like they're being exposed and they're trying to figure out how they can practice social distancing even while being in the courtroom, etc. But I will mention, by the way, that we tend not to think about these things because, thank God, I mean, I don't know if I know everybody in this class's personal situation at home, but I'm pretty sure everybody's in a healthy situation at home. But many of us tend not to think about the fact that when people are quarantined at home, not always is that the safest place for them. There are people who are quarantined at home.
This is absolutely tremendous.
Come again?
Tremendous news.
Come again? Jeff? Not sure if that was a mistake. Anyways, but there are people who are quarantined at home with an abusive spouse, or with an abusive parent, or with an abusive child, whatever situation that may be. Those are obviously terrible situations, and obviously, yes. I think that's why Esther was sharing with us that they need to make sure to keep certain parts of the justice system open. But here, the Torah is sharing with us even beyond that. Okay, let's look beyond the regular justice system, beyond the making sure that we're not, literally at each other's throats and surviving throughout the world. The Torah is driving home the importance of justice, truth, and peace. I know right now we're focusing on justice. Soon we're going to focus on truth and peace. The Torah is telling us these are important things also to God because God is like a parent to his children, right? Not just to the Jewish people, to all human beings. And just as a parent gets no greater joy, and I can't say this personally myself, I only have one, and he always gets along with himself. But just as a parent has no greater joy than when their children are getting along with each other. I see some of the parents smiling at the camera. They get no greater joy than when they see their children getting along with each other. And by the way, this goes for when there's something negative. In other words, there's something that they could be feuding about and they're not. This also goes, by the way, for positive. I know my parents get the greatest joy when they see us all working together for something. Many of you on this call here are familiar with the fact that a year and a half ago, my brother was going through something with his Chabad house, and where they wanted to have him demolish his Chabad house because of a covenant that he had violated during the construction. Anyways, without getting into the whole thing, and my whole family rallied behind it. And I remember the tremendous amount of nachas my father said it brought for him. In that case, it was because of something negative. He needed money fundraised. So we ran a major fundraising campaign and we fundraised hundreds of thousands of dollars. He needed help with publicity. So we ran a major publicity campaign, etc. And that gives tremendous amount of nachas to parents. How much more so to God? We're all of the human beings in the world are his children. The minimum that he requires us. All right, you're not doing every mitzvah in the book. No problem. I'm not going to destroy the world for that. But if you cannot even get along, says God, this is a basic requirement for me. It's interesting. I said that tonight's class, or this morning's class, is not really going to have that much to do with our current situation, but I guess it has more so than we realize. This applies completely to what's going on now. You hear these stories, you see these videos coming out from different places where, when the world gets shut down and lockdown, etc., it starts to bring out the worst in some people, and whether there's mobs or riots or whatever it is. And we have to remember that that's not who we are. Justice and truth and peace, these are important values. Before we keep going into the Did You Know section, which is going to talk about how we function civilly, I would like to point out something very interesting that I read. I actually saw with a source, so give me a moment. Yes, I saw this from Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau. So Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau is the former chief rabbi of Israel, Ashkenazic chief rabbi of Israel, I should say, the former one, not the current one. I believe currently it's a son. In any event, so when he has a book called Yachal Yisrael on Pirkei on ethics of our fathers, and he shares as follows. He says, how interesting is it that when this Mishnah, he takes a different approach to the difference between this Mishnah and the prior Mishnah. He says this Mishnah is talking to us on an individual level. It's talking to us as a human being. He says, as a human being, we have three faculties in our body, mind, soul, makeup, whatever you want to call it, right? In our life, in our way of interacting with the world, which are crucial for us to control if we are going to get along with the rest of the world. He says, and those are justice, truth, and peace. But he says those correspond to the three ways with which we interact with the world. Two of them obvious, one of them less so. Those are thought, speech, and action, right? If me and, I'll take Yosef Ilan as an example, are going to interact with each other, the most common way that we interact is action, right? I do something for him, he does something for me, I push him or I hug him, right? A positive or a negative act. Usually with Yosef Ilan, more hugging than pushing. Right now, more pushing than hugging, social distancing. Anyways, but my point is, those are actions. And we have speech, right? I can affect another human being with speech. We're constantly speaking, whether to other people or about other people. We all know about Lashon Hara. With speech, we can interact with another person. But also thought really has a very, very deep impact on our interaction with somebody else. Besides forgetting all, esoteric here, where many people have proven that when you think about somebody strongly enough, they begin to think about you. There's definitely a certain energy that passes between the two of you. But let's stay on a very superficial level. On a very superficial level, if I think positive thoughts about Malka Nicholson, then in my mind, I have a positive approach to Malka Nicholson. And therefore, when it comes to speech and action, I'll be able to have a proper approach to her, right? If I'm thinking negative thoughts about someone, then it will be very difficult for me to go, although I could technically, think negative thoughts about somebody, not really get along with somebody, but pretend on the outside to do it. We do that very often just to socially, get along with other people. But thought has a profound impact on the way we interact with other people. So let's talk about these three things, and we'll see that in a certain way, what Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the author of this Mishnah, is telling us is that these three things, thought, speech, and action, these three things, justice, truth, and peace, really correspond to those three things. Think about it. What is justice all about? Justice is almost never about words that people say to each other. It's almost always about actions that people do to each other. Justice is our mechanism as a society to make sure that our actions are proper and amicable between each other. Truth, on the other hand, is all about words, right? If somebody does something terrible but always speaks truth, you might have all sorts of things against them, but truth they speak, right? They're always speaking truthfully. And speaking truth helps to lead a just society. It does. It helps to help us get along with each other, etc. I'm not talking about truth, when your spouse asks you, how do I look in this dress? And you say the truth, okay, sometimes a little white lie might be called for. But I'm talking about truth as a whole, as a society, to get along with each other, right? We have to act truthfully. We have to do our business dealings justly, etc. Number 3 is peace. Peace is not something that's tangible, right? Of course, if I sock someone in the face, I probably will not be at peace with them. So it definitely, sorry, I just missed a call. I want to make sure it wasn't somebody trying to get into the class. This is still new to lots of us. Peace is something that's primarily to do with our thoughts. What do I mean by that? Excuse me. What do I mean by that? When we think properly about another human being, that is what creates peace. In other words, when I think positive thoughts about someone else, that's when we become at peace with each other. Everything else is symptoms. Those are symptoms of what come out of it. The speech, the actions, the things that I do to them that we call that not at peace, right? When we start to see that two people are in a fight, usually that's just the end result. There's lots that's been going on in their minds that's been making them hate each other, possibly based on actions. But if we can control our minds, if we can control how we think with other people, then we will be at peace with each other on a very, very deep level. Okay, we're running a little bit low on time here. We're doing okay. We're going to skip around a little bit. If I can ask Ron, I'm assuming you can see the textbook. If not, I know you have a textbook. Can you read for us, please? I'm going to unmute you. Hold on. I think you have to unmute yourself, Ron. There we go. You want to just do a test?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. We can hear you. So if you can read for us word power, which is about the words ve'al ha'emes, which means and on truth, which is the third of the three things. Go ahead.
Okay. In the Holy Script used for a separate Torah called Kasav Ashiri, all the letters that make up the word
Sheker,
falsehood, stand on only one foot. The letters of, let's see, emet, truth, on the other hand, have 2 feet that help them stand upright on their own. In the end, lies will fall apart and truth will always remain standing.
So this is a very powerful point. And I've always loved it because the letter, as we're all familiar, there is modern Hebrew, which is called Ivrit, and then there is Lashon HaKodesh, right, which means the Holy Tongue. And the reason it's called Lashon HaKodesh, and they're very similar, but they're not entirely the same. Modern Ivrit takes many words from English and from Latin, etc. The Lashon HaKodesh, the Holy Tongue in its pure original, in other words, the language with which the Torah is written, is considered holy not just because it's the original language with which the Torah is written, but it's actually considered the language with which God created the world. For those of you, I'm assuming that's everyone, that's familiar with that are familiar with the text from Genesis, when God does create the world, you'll remember that when God creates the world, the way that he does so is with speech. It says, Vayomer Elokim yehi or. God said, let there be light, and there was light. God said, let there spread forth vegetation into the world, and there was. Interestingly enough, those words are what then formed the Torah. Those letters are then what formed the world. So it's no doubt that those letters have a tremendous amount of holiness to it. So whereas in English, we wouldn't start analyzing the word truth and the word falsehood to start seeing how they're spelled. In Hebrew, we do. Look how interesting that is. The letters for emet, the letters for truth, in addition to the famous line, which you may have heard, which is that it goes all the way through the Aleph bet. Aleph is the first letter, Taf is the last letter, Mem is the central letter. Those are the letters that make up together the word emet, showing that emet, truth, has to go through everything. But also, look at the word, the way, and you can see the illustration on your screen if you have it. Look at the words, look at the way the word emet, the letters stand on their own. You see that? The letters can stand because every one of them has either a flat bottom or at least 2 legs, just by simple physics. The word for sheker, the word for falsehood, is the opposite. Every letter comes down to a point. The shin comes down to a point. And we all know that on one tiny little leg you can't stand. A kuf comes down to one little point. A resh comes down to one little point. And that's to show us that truth is extremely important because only truth stands forever. Something that is false will not stand forever. Okay, another interesting point, we were talking about the creation of the world. If we are saying that these 3 things are crucial to the existence of the world, then while they might not be stated expressly in the Torah or in the creation of the world, of course they're stated explicitly in the Torah, but in the creation of the world in Genesis they might not be stated explicitly. One commentary points out. Hold on, I'm going to distract you guys for just a moment. Menachem, say hi to everybody. Can you see Leah and Esther and Yosef?
Hi, Mendel. Hi, Mendel.
Say hi.
Hi.
Hey, Mendel.
Tati's teaching us. Tati's teaching us.
Say hi, Shimon. Can you see Shimon? Oh, see that? And see Esther and Malka. Oh, you remember Malka, right? Yeah. That's Stephanie. Stephanie's camera's blocked right now. But look, Esther has a puppet. You see Esther has a puppet? Is that funny? Okay. So I want to point out that one commentary teaches us that in the Torah, the word for vegetation, when vegetation is created, which is, I believe, on the 3rd day. Maybe mistaken with that. I don't have a Bereshit open in front of me. But when it says Tadshe Haaretz Desha, let the earth spread forth, and the word for vegetation is Desha. For those of you that know Hebrew, it's Dalid Shin Aleph. That's the word for vegetation. Now, Dalid Shin Aleph are an acronym. They are a Rashi Tevot for the three things that are mentioned in this Mishnah that we're learning today. Din, which is justice, Shalom, which is peace, and Emet, which is peace, which is truth. Desha stands for those three. So we even see in the tale of creation of the world that there's an emphasis put on the fact that Din, Shalom, and Emet, these three things are crucial ingredients. Okay, we're going to start wrapping up the class. Those of you that attend on a consistent basis are familiar with the fact that whenever we teach, whenever we learn in Pirkei Avot about something important, we always try to connect it to who is the author of that Mishnah and why would he specifically be emphasizing. So Yosef Ilan, give me a thumbs up if you can see the text. Perfect. So I'm going to unmute you, and if you could read for us the small biography of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel.
Okay. Well, I see behind the quote. Is that?
No, I mean
the biography. Yes.
Yeah, biography.
I had the videos covering it. Okay. Shimon ben Gamliel of this Mishnah is the grandson of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, quoted in the previous Mishnah. He was the father of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. He was known for his humility, even referring to himself as a fox in comparison to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Shimon worked very hard to strengthen the prestige of power of the office of the Nasi, not for his own honor, but for the honor of the Torah. He is so greatly respected that wherever his opinion is brought up or brought down in the Mishnah, in fact, over 100 times, the halacha follows the opinion with the exception of only 3 cases. His son, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, once said, there are 3 people in history who were truly humble. Yohanan ben Shaul Hamlech, the B'nai Basira, is that correct? Basira? And my father.
Okay, thank you very much. So I didn't see an interesting thing here. There is another interesting point about Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Let me give you a little bit more history. I thought there would be more here in this biography, but let me give you a little bit more about him. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel lives just a number of generations after the destruction of the Holy Temple. In this case, we're talking about the Second Temple, right? The Romans. Many of you may be familiar with the story of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, that during the siege of Jerusalem, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai pretended to be dead. They pretended to have a funeral for him, and they snuck him outside of the city. When they did so, or the reason they did so, was so that he should be able to beseech, whether it's a welcome Marguerite. I didn't notice that you joined us, but welcome Marguerite. Perfect. We can't see you. If you can activate your camera, we'll be able to see you. Meanwhile, we only hear you.
I'm doing my best.
Okay. So when he snuck out of the city, I won't share the whole story just for time constraints. I mean, he comes to a man. I forgot his name. I think his name was Sisera, I believe. Anyways, at the time, he was the lead general who was laying siege to Jerusalem. He was not the Caesar. And during the story with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he calls him Your Honor, and he accuses him of treason because he's calling him Your Honor when only the Caesar in Rome is supposed to be called Your Honor. And then it turns out that as he's talking to him, a messenger comes and actually makes him the Caesar. In any event, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, suffice it to say, the Caesar realizes that he's a holy man. Therefore, he tells him, ask whatever you wish, and it shall be granted. Now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai realizes that if he asks for the war to end, it will not happen. And so that's why he asks for 3 things. We won't get into all 3. One of the things that he asks for is Yavna v'chachameha. He asks for the city of Yavna and its sages. In other words, for the continuation of the Sanhedrin, or the continuation of the leadership of the Jewish people by a justice system, by their own justice system. He is granted that, and that survives for a few generations. In the times of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, that was already disbanded. They already did not have that anymore. This had a lot to do with the Bar Kokhba rebellion, which many of you may be familiar with. In any event, this is a very hectic time for the Jewish people, as you can imagine. And hence the fact that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is reminding us of the extreme importance of keeping these three things. Because if we don't, then the current turbulent situation may actually erupt in war, is what he's essentially warning us. Okay, let's just end off with this sparks over here, which is essentially the point that I mentioned to you earlier, just in really short. Shimon, can you see the text? Give me a thumbs up if you can see the text. Perfect. So why don't you read for us the spark section? I think you have to unmute your... Perfect. Just test it. Hello? We don't hear you. 1 second. You want to just say testing, testing? I don't know. No, we don't hear you. Okay. So Leah, why don't you read for us? Personal pillars in the sparks section, and we'll end with that.
The three pillars of this Mishnah can also refer to the three faculties of thought, speech, and action, the pillars that hold up each person's private world. Justice refers to action, treating your fellow in a fair manner. Truth refers to speech, speaking only the truth. Peace refers to thought. Even in the privacy of your own mind, you should be at peace with everyone.
Okay, and this is basically what we mentioned earlier, that in our thought, our speech, and our action, you can see this in the beautiful illustration here, the three pillars, that these three things are crucial, not just holding up a society as a whole, but holding up ourselves as a society. And so with that, we'll leave you. I hope you all enjoyed this morning's lesson, and please join us. Our next class is tomorrow evening at 7 p.m., the title of which is How Do I Lead? I don't remember the exact title. Hold on, I'll share it.
How do I stay calm in a topsy-turvy world?
There we go. How can belief in God help me lead a more relaxed lifestyle? Before I leave you, let me leave you with the opening exercise of tomorrow night's class, because I was preparing earlier, I think it was last week, and I found it fascinating. The exercise goes as follows. Everyone on this chat, on this class right now, I'm going to assume considers themselves a religious Jew, which means they consider themselves monotheists. In other words, they consider themselves people who believe in one God. Here's my question for you. When is the last time that you thought about monotheism, or you thought about the belief in one God, besides for religious experiences? In other words, shul, prayer, learning Torah, those all don't count. Give me an example. When is the last time, and you don't have to answer now, but that's going to be the opening exercise tomorrow, where we're going to try to see, when is the last time that I thought about the way God affects the world in my personal life? In other words, I'm walking down the street and I'm stressed out, or wherever, walking down the street. Usually the stress happens when we're driving down the street. You're driving, you're in traffic, you're running late to something. When is the last time in such an experience, or even, by the way, at the end of a stressful day, or at the beginning of a stressful day, when is the last time we've thought of monotheism in such a context? We've thought about the fact that we believe in one God in such a context. And this is a very powerful point, and it can help actually realizing that and coming up with proper meditation to actually, by meditation, I don't mean sitting for hours. I just mean thinking about this and having that guide our lives can help in general in life, and specifically under current circumstances, to help us lead a more relaxed lifestyle and a more trusting in God lifestyle. So please join us tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. I will have the classroom open at 6:45, as I always do, 15 minutes before the class. I recognize that there are lots of technological things at play here. Thank you all for joining us. This morning's class has been sponsored in memory of Benjamin Ben Yaakov, Leah's uncle, and we hope that his neshama has an aliyah. If you would like to sponsor tomorrow night's class, please text me or reach out to me or email me. It is $54. Thank you all. Have a great morning. I hope you all enjoyed your own bagels. This was a bring your own bagel session. Or whatever else you have. Oh, I'll end off with a joke. A friend of mine tells me that he heard that there's a shortage in the stores of lots of food, like there's shortages of bread, there's shortages of potatoes, lots of things like that are kind of going off hotcakes on the pasta, the shortages of pasta. So he says, I don't understand. What happened to all of the people that were on the keto diet and on juice cleanses and all sorts of things like that? All of a sudden, they're all eating carbs. Anyways, have a great day. Please enjoy your bagel or your keto diet or your juice cleanse or whatever, or your coffee or whatever you're on this morning. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Of course.